it's Beth at Paris House Woolworks, and today I'm going to do a really quick video on how to put a rug hooking pattern on the grain. I know that I've had a lot of customers come in from time to time and say, this pattern I bought somewhere is not on the grain and I'm having a hard time hooking it, and we have gone on to fix it. Or I have students who want to design their own patterns and put their own patterns on the grain but aren't quite sure how to do that. It is something that we cover in the design class that we teach here called Yes You Are and Yes You Can, but it's also just such a really simple thing that I can show you in a matter of minutes. And so I thought I would do a video, and then it'll just be there for your reference whenever you need it. And hopefully it'll get you on the right path to either correcting patterns that are not drawn on the grain or doing your own patterns. So I'm going to tilt the camera down so that you'll be able to see my hands and the linen that I have laid out. And I just want to let you know that this works on all kinds of foundations. Here at Paris House Woolworks, we put patterns on linen, which is my favorite, and monk's cloth and rug warp for our customers. And it works the same way on all foundations. Some foundations are a little bit easier to work with than others, but the concept is absolutely the same for all of them. So I'm going to tilt the camera down and you'll be able to see what we're doing. So what I have here is a 24 by 24 piece of serged linen. And of course, it's important to have your edges secured somehow. We use a 4-spool 2-needle overlock machine and serge our edges, but certainly you can use a zigzag sewing machine and just zigzag twice and then cut the excess off. Or you can use painter's tape. That works well, or duct tape. So just something that's going to keep your edges from raveling while you're working on your piece. That's just kind of an aside. One of my favorite tools in the studio are these quilting tools, these quilting squares and quilting rulers. This one's made by Fiskars. I picked this up at a Walmart, but you can kind of get these anywhere. You can order them online. I recommend going to your favorite quilting or sewing shop, an independent small business. That would be where, that would be my first choice for anything. But these are available a lot of places, and the nice thing about them is that they have measurements going in both directions. Now here in our studio, we like to have a 4-inch frame allowance on all of our patterns. So since my piece is 24 by 24, I know that I can get a 16 by 16 square on this with 4 inches on either side. So when you're doing a pattern, if you have created a sketch for something that's 12 by 12, just add 8, and now you know that your linen needs to be 20 by 20, or if it's, 12 by 10, you know that your pattern needs to be 18, or your linen needs to be 18 by 20. Just always add 8 to give yourself enough frame allowance on each side. So I'm going to start with one corner, and I'm going to draw my 16 by 16 inch square on this particular piece of linen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down so that it's 4 inches this way and 4 inches this way, and I'm going to make my first dot. Now you can do this with a regular ruler. Don't feel like you have to get one of these tools, but I find especially in pattern design, these tools are indispensable. They really help me with my pattern math if it's a geometric or if I'm adding a border or something like that. So I've made my first dot 4 inches in on both sides so that I will have that 4-inch frame allowance. And now I'm just going to measure, and I'm going to measure to 16 because I'm making a 16 by 16 inch square, and I'm putting a dot right here at 16. Now, what a lot of new people, including myself when I was new, are tempted to do is use this straight edge to draw the line, the first line. You do not want to do that. That is what gets your pattern off the grain, because the linen as all of us know, the linen, the monk's cloth, the rug warp, whatever we're working on, it has a little bit of twist to it. So if we draw a straight edge along, we're probably not going to be along a single grain of that fabric. So you want to move this out of the way, orient this towards yourself, start at your first dot, and bring your line. You put the point of your Sharpie right in the ditch of that grain and bring it to your second dot. In this case, my dot was actually in the right place, but sometimes when you do this, you'll notice that your dot is off a little bit to one side or the other, and that's okay. As long as you've gone down the linen in the ditch of the grain, a single grain of the weave, you're perfect, you're golden. So now I'm going to go from this dot that I just created. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw a dot at the 16-inch mark, and I'm going to do the same thing. I've removed the straight edge, and I'm coming straight down the linen. And this time, I don't know if you can see that, my dot was a little bit off. But I know that my line is in the grain because the tip of the Sharpie never left the grain. One word about Sharpies. When they become dull, it's best to just start with a new Sharpie because, especially on monk's cloth, having a nice sharp point is a good way to keep your writing tip in the grain. So we're going to just now we're going to start from the one we just left. We're going to draw another 16-inch mark, remove the straight edge, come on down, and again, you can see how far off I would have been if I had just used a straight edge point to point. And the last line, of course, you don't need to measure because now you've got this end and this end. This is where I started. This is where I ended up. And I'm just going to draw my straight edge in the grain. And it matches up perfectly at that beginning corner. It has to, because as long as you're in the grain all the way around, this linen is woven a certain way, you are going to end up right where you began. So that's it. That's how you do it. Just as a little bit of an extra bonus, say I wanted a 1-inch border on this. I would measure in from the corner 1 inch and put a dot there. And I could go around and do it exactly the same way I had before, or because now I have all my starting points exactly where they belong, I can also just make a dot 1 inch in at every corner. And I always like to do a little double checking. I think it's always better to, you know how carpenters say, measure once. No, measure twice, cut once. I think it's always best to check. Okay, and then now, because I have my reference points in all the right places, I know that these 1-inch points are all in the right places. I can just do the same thing and connect dot to dot in the grain. Now, if you're doing this for the first time and so there we are. Now we have a 1-inch border all the way around. What I was going to say is if you're doing this for the first time and your pen or your pencil or whatever you're using pops out of the grain, no worries, just go back. It might not look as neat. just go back and fix it. It might not look as neat as it would if you had more practice, but getting your line in the grain is something that I think most of us really appreciate. And, there are some caveats. If you're doing a really primitive design and you don't want your straight lines within the pattern or your edges on the exterior on the grain, if you want a very primitive look where, the piece just isn't on the grain, it is a little intentionally wonky, then that's a whole different thing. And, feel free to do that. As anyone who's taken classes with me knows, I am really not rule bound. I think that your creativity is the only limitation. And usually that's not a limitation. Everybody's creative. But if you are working on a pattern where you want a little more precision and you really want the thing to be on the grain, this is the technique, and you can see how easy it is. So if you have any questions on this at all, feel free to email me at parishouse, that's Paris with 2 R's, parisHouseWoolworks@gmail.com. And you can also email me at info@parisHouseWoolworks.com. And, I'll be happy to answer any questions or hop on Zoom with you to demonstrate it again if you need a little help. But I thought putting it on a video would be nice, because then you can just kind of take your time and stop and start the video if there's anything that you're not quite sure about. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.